In my 2023 offering of natural language processing, I had students write questions that computers couldn't answer. Many of those questions were great, and I have some examples of those in another video, link in the description, but some of them weren't. But I didn't think it would be right or appropriate to criticize students' questions publicly, so I'm going to take bad questions from the German board game Spiel des Wissens. Translated into English, of course, don't click away. First, let me emphasize that not all of the questions are bad. It's still a good game. I'd recommend it. The questions are up to date, and it's fun to play with my 7-year-old daughter because there are both easy and hard questions so that kids can play alongside adults. But some of the questions are still problematic. My daughter and I played with my mom for Mother's Day. So I thought I'd share some of the questions that weren't so great and describe why they're imperfect and frustrating for human players. They have many of the same properties that the students in my class wrote. If your questions use these tactics to make them hard for a computer to answer, you're probably going to make the questions hard or impossible for a human to answer as well. One of the biggest problems of Manchester paradigm questions, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have a link to a video describing that in the description, is when a person is asking the question, thinks that there is one correct answer, but the question admits many different answers. So let's take the question, what is the name of the literary genre in which elements of the real and magical world are intertwined? The official answer was fairy tales. But when we played the game, my daughter argued that fantasy should be accepted. I agreed, and I think that an even better answer might be magical realism. This is particularly problematic for location and temporal questions. Where are the Virunga volcanoes? This could be Earth, Africa, or just the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the national park is. There's nothing in the question to let you know you need to answer all 3 countries that the Virunga Range go through. I said Africa and was ruled incorrect. You could say something like 3 answers required, or 3 countries required. That would make this a lot more clear. Well, that was more specific than I thought it would be. Here's a question that's less specific than I thought. Where was the first Iron Man? Has the natural answer Oahu, one of the Hawaiian islands. The official answer of Hawaii sounds false if you think about Hawaii the island rather than Hawaii the state. But you could also imagine someone answering the United States, since it's connected to the US Navy. The question should say something like, on which island, or in which American state, or in what country, to make it more reasonable for a person to answer. Sometimes questions are vague not in what they're asking about per se, but in terms of the definition. Let's take this question. What countries border France to the south? What does it mean to border to the south? The official answers are Spain and Andorra. That makes sense. You can stand in those countries, walk straight north, and end up in France. But if that's the definition we're using, there are other countries that would work. Our family once took a vacation in Baden-Baden, and France was to our north. So my daughter naturally answered Germany. And I think that's a reasonable answer. Well, not all of Germany borders France to the south. Some of it does. Thus, if your definition of border to the south means a border where you can go due south on a road from France to another country, then you could answer lots of different countries. Germany to Baden-Baden, as I mentioned before, Switzerland from Basel, Italy, Mont Blanc, Luxembourg, Solins, or Belgium, Fromelins. As always, please complain about my French pronunciations in the comments. But don't forget that French territory isn't just in Europe. Thanks to its overseas department of French Guiana, you can also answer Brazil and Suriname. Well, maybe Germany is excluded because it also borders France to the west, but thanks to the Spanish exclave of Libya, you can start in Spain and walk to France in every cardinal direction. So Spain also borders France to the west and north and east. A stronger version of this problem is when there's an implicit assumption in the question that's not stated. In linguistics, this is called a false presupposition. One example of this is, what color are flamingos' feathers? The official answer said pink. Now, this is true if the flamingos are eating brine shrimp or other foods rich in beta-carotene. When flamingos are born, however, they're white. In a game written for a European audience, it makes sense that the question, what voltage comes out of the socket, would have the answer 230 volts. My daughter, since we live in the United States, said 120. What connector do you use to charge a phone has the official answer micro USB. Of all the questions that I'm complaining about, this one just seems completely inexplicable to me. The whole thing about phones is that there are a bazillion different chargers. Every company used to have their own charger. And even in the age of standardization, there's micro USB, USB-C, mini USB, and whatever Apple is doing today. I would love to live in a world where it was the case that you only had to have a micro USB charger to charge your phone. Sometimes when a question is vague, people add something subjective to try to make it more specific, but end up failing because the thing making it more specific is subjective. What's the name of Christopher Columbus's most famous ship? The official answer is Santa Maria, but there's evidence that La Niña was Columbus's favorite, and also had the official name Santa Clara. To specifically distinguish between the ships, you could rephrase the question like, which of Columbus's ships was stripped of its timbers to build a fort called La Navidad in northern Haiti? That's not subjective. There's only one ship that applies to. Similarly, what famous novel takes place in an Italian Benedictine abbey has the official answer Name of the Rose? And it is probably what most people would think of, but if you're not ancient like I am, maybe you'd think of the Sarah Dunnett book Sacred Hearts instead. So you could instead ask something like, what famous novel set in an Italian Benedictine abbey has a main character whose name combines William of Ockham and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Hound of the Baskervilles? But it's not just the questions that can be bad. Sometimes the answers are problematic. Let's take this question. Who was the last Tsar of Russia? The given answer is Nicholas Alexandrovich Romanov. Now, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. That's what he was called when he was born. But that's not how people know him as Tsar. His regal name was Nicholas II. Ideally, you should have both as acceptable answers. But if you only have one, it should probably be Nicholas II. But again, ideally, you should have more answers. Nicholas II, Nikolai II Alexandrovich Romanov, and then the same thing in Cyrillic. I have a paper with Chung Lei about this, link in the description. A final example of bad questions is the swerve. I didn't see any of this from Spiel des Wissens, so I had to search for some examples on the internet. One man gained fame for starting the Kulturkampf as well as a war with France. Otto von Bismarck lends his name to the capital of which US state? As you can see, you start out thinking that the answer will be Bismarck, and then it suddenly changes to being about North Dakota. A less intentional kind of swerve is when the pronouns or references are unclear. A good question needs to establish early on whether you're looking for a person, a title, or a date. What kind of thing is the question looking for? There are several ways a question marks what it's asking about, sometimes with a pronoun. He was born in Tampico, Illinois, before being elected president. Sometimes with a determiner. This is the most populous state in the United States. Sometimes with an interrogative. What is the capital of California? Things get confusing when you use a bunch of them at the same time. What the heck is this question looking for as its answer? After being born in Tampico, Illinois, he always lived in this populous state until moving out of the capital when he was elected president. Now this goes way overboard. Nobody would write a question this confusing. But you can avoid this confusion by following these rules. 1. Don't use a pronoun until you have introduced the answer type. What composer, for instance, in some other way. After it's clear what you're asking about, then you can use a pronoun. Rule number 2, only use this or what when referring to the thing that you're talking about. Use consistent references to the answer. It's okay to use different references, but they shouldn't contradict each other. This author of 1984 and this volunteer in the Spanish Civil War are okay because they're about different aspects of the same person. But you shouldn't say this British author and this Spanish resident, even if they're technically correct. And certainly don't do this to create a swerve question. To be clear, it's impossible to always write a great question. Mistakes happen, and this is why it's always good to get a second pair of eyes to look at a question and edit it, or go through a playtesting process. But it gets easier over time with practice, and hopefully just knowing about the ways that questions can go wrong will help you avoid these common traps. This is just one video from a course that I'm teaching. If you want to get the whole context, check out the course webpage, linked below. There you can find all of the videos in the right order. YouTube likes to show you older videos out of order, homeworks, exercises, and recommended readings. And if you want to help other people find videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe to provide a big gradient to the algorithm.